All information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. You should consider the appropriateness of this information with regards to your individual objectives, financial situation, and needs. Welcome to Sharing More Than the Sheets, a podcast to help you and your partner make better financial and lifestyle decisions so that you can both focus on the things that you love. I'm your host, Michael Khouri, financial planner, green thumb, husband, and just dad. This segment is called Michael's Magic Moment. It's my opportunity to play a little snippet from one of our previous episodes, which resonated with our listeners, that I received feedback from, or I felt really had an impact on some people's lives. Hope you enjoy. Today we go back to episode 7, where I talk about DIY and the issues or the perils of DIY. Now, as an advisor, you can assume that we see so many DIY jobs all the time. And some are okay, some aren't too bad, some are excellent, but the majority have their risks. And in this episode, I really talk about and I really highlight the importance of getting professional advice or seeing a professional for anything in your life. Now, sometimes you can do things yourself, but there are certain issues, there are certain parts of your life that you probably don't want to just Google it. As an example, your health. If you have a pretty serious health issue or something that could potentially become serious, you probably shouldn't be Googling it, because if you ignore it over a long period of time, something really serious can eventuate from that initial issue, which you probably didn't think was a big deal, or you probably thought that you had treated, and it can cause a lot more serious damage. It's the same thing with money. Sometimes, especially when it comes to superannuation or investing or really anything money related, if you don't treat the issue or if you don't follow the correct solution from day one, it can easily cause long-term problems or something later on which you may or may not even realize that you've done. As an advisor, I really believe in the benefits of financial advice. And I really do feel that if you speak to a professional, if you seek the advice of a professional, you are more likely to have a much better outcome for you and your family compared to if you do it yourself. That doesn't say that all DIY is bad, and that doesn't say that you can't DIY some of your finances. But if you at least seek the advice of a professional first and understand what you're dealing with, it won't just make the experience a lot easier to deal with, but it'll also make it a much more memorable experience, because there's nothing worse than trying to or having to fix something that you've done wrong. Some things aren't reversible. Some things are, but they take a lot more effort. And sometimes the cost of fixing something or the opportunity cost can outweigh what it actually would have cost to see a professional in the first place. So let's go back to episode 7, where I discuss the perils of DIY, and I give a fantastic example as to when me, as an advisor, I would see DIY being a very, very serious and potentially damaging issue. A situation where DIY is a massive failure is when somebody, for example, isn't really financially literate enough to understand the words in a product disclosure statement, or to understand what the difference is between certain things, or when somebody doesn't really have the motivation or the time to read up on things, or the attention to detail when comparing certain things. These are the times where we see it regularly as advisors, where somebody, for example, will talk to a friend or a family member, and they'll ask them, they'll just get information off them or advice, and just to see what works for them, because if it works for them, it might work for them. If it works for their friend, it most likely works for them, right? The answer most of the time is no, because everybody's situation is completely different. Just talking to a coworker about superannuation can sometimes be a massive fail, because if that coworker, for example, is in their 50s and you're in your 20s, they're going to have completely different goals to you. They're going to have their investment horizon is completely different to yours. They're retiring within the next 15, 20 years. While you've got decades ahead of you. So Age is a big thing. Financial situation, financial circumstances, can affect whether advice that works for one person is going to work for another. Because, you could be talking to somebody about investment advice, yet they earn twice as much as you and have 3 times more savings in the bank. Goals. This is probably the biggest thing as financial advisors that we work with when it comes to helping clients financially, is what their goals are, what they are working towards, what they want to achieve. For example, talking to person A, their main priority might be to boost the superannuation or to retire at a certain age. Talking to another person, their main goal might be to save up for a wedding, or to pay off debt because they've got 3 times more debt than the first person. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that every person has different factors in their life that influence their financial situation now and in the future. And what works for one person most of the time does not work for another. And if it happens to work for that person, and this goes back to my example of somebody that does things themselves, many times they'll look back 5 years later and sort of realize that this amazing advice that they got on their superannuation has clashed with this amazing advice that they got on their insurance from another friend. And that strategy has clashed with the investment advice that they got off Google. And what tends to happen as well is that you suddenly have different strategies working in different places, but they're not working together. And the idea of having an advisor or having an overall strategy is to look at everything as one big picture, to make sure that there's one story, essentially, that there's a story being told, that there's a reason for why things are the way they are. And if you've ever looked at this yourself, if you've ever read a product disclosure statement, if you've ever compared insurance companies or super funds, you will find that there are so many different options to choose from. There are so many different variables to products, there's different ways of structuring things. There's a lot more to it than most people think. Thanks for joining us on Sharing More Than the Sheets. Please make sure you subscribe to be updated with future episode releases, and feel free to share this episode with any friends or family that you think it might benefit. Please visit us at sharingmorethanthesheets.com.au to submit questions or requests for future podcast topics. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au.